Jay, welcome to the call.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So we've been knowing each other. Jay has been actually a source of inspiration that has created Innouvo to some extent. I read his book was 3, 4 years ago. The book is called Disrupt You. He was one of the first guests in our YouTube podcast at the time, and he literally shared some wisdom, insight from his amazing career as a serial entrepreneur, working with anyone from Richard Branson to Bill Gates, the Pope, Justin Timberlake, in the music industry, seeing basically the disruption of the music industry and using this experience basically to evangelize and help all of us in other industry to be careful and to react and to act on basically what's going on in the today's accelerating environments and accelerated innovation. So Jay, welcome to the call. We look forward to have your speech today, which is from now until 12:30. We should leave about 10 minutes for questions.
Excellent. Honored to be here, honored to join you all. Today's talk is really interesting. Especially coming after Andres, where he talks about the need for passion and what passion will do to get you there. After the success of Disrupt You, I really tried to study why some people are successful at implementing their ideas and why some people have challenges that they don't overcome. And I gathered that all down to 12 truths. If you base your business on these 12 truths, you'll be successful. And it's the basis for my new book, Future-Proofing You. And to prove my premise, I wanted to do something that no other author had done before. I wanted to try an experiment. So I took a young man from Europe who grew up on welfare, and I mentored him 1 day a week for a year. I provided him no contacts. I provided him no capital, and I didn't make any introductions. So it was a complete fair test. And by don't want to wreck the ending of the book, but by the 11th month, he had become a self-made millionaire. Now, I've taught how to build high-tech startups in universities, but this was different. This isn't a university student. This isn't an engineer. This is someone just who can discover their passion. When I worked with, his name was Vin, when I worked with Vin and tried to figure out what are the basic elements that have to be achieved to be successful. The second thing that I wanted to look at was what has changed post-pandemic. And it was interesting, following again, Hyperloop, very passionate. We'll talk about that in a second, mindset and passion. But one fundamental difference is that the role of cities will become less important. We're not going back to a pre-pandemic life. What the pandemic proved was that you can have a remote workforce. Up until the pandemic, since the 1970s, people have tried working from homes and remote, and many companies have done it successfully, but it hadn't come mainstream. And once it hit mainstream, that genie doesn't go back in the bottle. And by that, I mean, for most of mankind, when you were starting a business, most throughout history, who were the best people that you could find within 5 or 10 miles of your business? That was your pool of talent. Now, the tools are good enough, the infrastructure good enough that you can hire the best people on the planet. And if you start your business with that mindset, you'll have a huge advantage over those companies that are still trying to have a headquarters and have everybody in there. And there's many advantages. One, workers are happier. All the studies during the pandemic, people that work at home are more productive, they enjoy their job, and there's less turnover. More importantly, you can live in less expensive areas. Up until 20 years ago, the majority of people that traveled the world were my age, over 50. Now, millennials are the #1 traveling group, and they're realizing that they can work their job from anywhere. So they don't have to wait till they're old to see the world. They can travel the world and do their job, live a month here, a month there. So that becomes a whole new approach. So given that our time is short, I'm going to breeze through these. There's more detail, there's more of the science behind them. But the first one is so obvious, and most people skip it, and that's mindset. You really have to foster a growth mindset. If you look what's in common, and I started no different than anybody on this call. I wanted to start a new business. I didn't know what I was doing. One day you wake up and dozens of friends become billionaires. And we weren't smarter. It wasn't the right moment in history. It was a different mindset, a mindset that you can make change, a mindset that will carry you through the roller coasters of the up and down. The second thing that I realized no one talks about is fear. Everybody talks about these platitudes. You can overcome your fears. Don't overcome your fear. That's a horrible advice. The only reason you're on this call today is for thousands of generations of your ancestors, they had fear. Some guy in a cave was afraid of the saber-toothed tiger, and that's why you're here today. Now, what you don't focus on enough, and what I learned in looking at those that have become successful, is you have to accept that the other people that you deal with in business also have fears. And our fears are controlled by our lizard brain, which is basically fight or flight. And so if you can learn to communicate by leveraging and accessing the three primary fears that people have in business, suddenly you can flip the equation. And a great example that comes to mind is 8 years ago, I wrote a white paper that said that social media would pick the next president of the United States. That seems obvious nowadays, but 8 years ago, not a single presidential candidate was advertising on social media. And they were spending $2 billion on television, and I had a digital agency and I wanted some of that money. So what does this have to do with fear? I set up meetings with each of the campaign managers of the leading 4 candidates, and I told them I was meeting all 4 of them and told them what we could do for them in digital. But I framed it in a way that they realized that their competitors would be using me. And if they didn't, and one of those other candidates won, they would never be hired to run a campaign again. So by the time I finished my journey to the 4 candidates' offices, I had all 4 as clients. Because fear of losing your job, fear of your boss, fear of many factors. So you got to break down those fears. The next thing that many people are afraid of is failing. You are going to fail. If you're sitting with somebody else, look each other in the eye, you're both going to fail. You cannot succeed your way to the top. You have to fail your way. You have to figure out what doesn't work. And you have to figure out that what doesn't work before you run out of capital. And that is the game of a startup. And so the faster you can iterate, the faster you can try different ideas before you raise a lot of capital with the least amount of capital and prove your thesis, the faster you get to the end. And I've taken stakes in over 100 startups in my career, been involved in many that you use all the time, LinkedIn, which we'll get to in a little bit. And each of these was destined to fail if they followed their business plan. But as they hit those things that they got wrong, that they predicted wrong, that they planned for wrong, they could quickly work through them and come up with a better business model. So Twitter was a music service. YouTube was a dating service. I mean, many businesses pivot because they figure out. And so what they're really doing is embracing failure. And if you talk to serial investors, they'd rather invest in a CEO who has failed than a first-time CEO. And so that's really a key thing. The fifth of the 12 truths brings us towards passion, but it's a different way of looking at it. Every one of us has a superpower. Now, you might not be able to fly through the air. You might not be able to bend time. You might not be able to do what Marvel Universe superheroes can do. But there is something about you that is unique and better than most. And the way to figure this out is next time friends are asking for advice or asking for your help, you'll notice a pattern of what they ask you about. Nobody ever asked me to come over and cook them a dinner. Don't have that skill. And it turned out a lot of years of my career to realize no one, and I've worked, Google's a client, Microsoft's a client still. I just stepped down from running a company that did $44 billion in consulting. No one ever hired me when they were having a good year. No one ever's first choice was, wow, we're doing so great. Let's call in Jay. It was usually, we've tried everything else. Let's call in Jay. My superpower happened to be figuring out new business models for businesses that couldn't. And so once you can identify your superpower, that gives you a huge head start, because in a world where people are so interconnected, where your phone is one click away from 6 billion other people, anyone can work with anyone, which means people are only going to work with you or hire you if you are the best in the world at what you're doing. So you have to narrow what you do and define your brand by that one thing. And that one thing is what will attract the customers, will build your business. And that applies to anyone. Now, that brings me to the next example. If I went to a construction site and there were 3 bricklayers, and I asked them, what are you doing? And the first guy says to me, I'm laying bricks. And the second guy says, I'm building a church. And the third guy says, I'm making a house of God. The first guy has a job. The second guy has a career, but the third guy has a calling. And I don't mean your calling has to be religious. I mean, what motivates that person, they're all doing the same task, is completely different. And one of the great examples are when you look at how many, especially in the US, how many major successful startups that become billion-dollar unicorns are founded where at least one of the partners is an immigrant or the child of an immigrant. The number is astounding. It's more than half. You go, well, what's different here? And the difference is somebody that came to another country to start their life over has a different motivation, whether they came because they were fleeing something, as in a refugee, or rather they were coming because they were seeking something like opportunity. Their motivation is different and their children's motivation is different than someone that's just maintaining the status quo. So those people have a calling. They have something that drives them. And so what you have to figure out real early on is how to take that perseverance and turn it into a passion. So I'll give you an example. My passion for the past decade has been, how do I teach people to be successful entrepreneurs? I'm not trying to make any money out of this. You don't write books to make money. I want to shorten the journey for others. I like a world that has democracy, and democracy is based on a middle class, and a middle class is created by entrepreneurs that create jobs. It's as simple as that. And I work with governments, and I've worked all over the world. I write books in tons of languages. But I realized that there were other issues out there. I wasn't that motivated to run another company. Been there, done that. Been a CEO of Nasdaq companies. But somebody came to me with a major problem. Our planet is overheating. In the lifetime of my granddaughter, there may not be humans on this planet. That's terrifying. What could I do about that? I'm not a scientist. And somebody came to me with an idea, and the idea was this: 25% of greenhouse gases don't come from factories or cars. The number one source of greenhouse gases is agriculture. Tilling the soil releases carbon that was sequestered. So you have to go to no-till and regenerative agriculture. And the downside of that is it actually uses more herbicides and pesticides, so more poisons in our food. So how do you get the poison out of food so that you can sequester more carbon so we can cool down the planet? And we can do this very, very quickly. And the answer turned out to be robots. Little robots, think of the size of a goat, that go in and eat all the weeds, but not the plants. So they came to me. I'm not a robot scientist. You remember, Steve Jobs created a $1 trillion company, the world's first $1 trillion company, without writing one line of code. He's not an engineer either. You can hire that skill set. So we started a company called Greenfield Robotics, and we're actually achieving it. What's driving me is not to make more money. I'll make more money for the investors. What's driving me is to solve a giant problem. So that's what it's really about. The next thing, which I completely overlooked in Disrupt You, and I realize is key to a world that's changing this quickly. So we're in a dynamic time where the norms of business, the norms of how we all interrelate, the tools that we have are changing faster than big companies can adapt and faster than most people can adapt. So you can't make it alone. No one built a unicorn company that was a one-man company. So that passion that you create will attract investors. That passion you create will get customers, will get employees, will get everything happening. But there's still one thing missing. You don't know everything. No one does. And as the world changes so quickly, you're going to need new skill sets, not that you can learn in the time, but that you can leverage extreme amounts of expertise and knowledge. In other words, mentors. So the era of the Middle Ages where you'd be an apprentice to somebody that was the blacksmith or the leathersmith or whatever and spend 7 years and learn that skill, that era is gone. You need a series of mentors for each stage of your career. And so I don't have time today, but I map out how to get them, how to get millionaires and billionaires to work for you for free. And Alistair knows the story because it was my first book. When I was just a kid starting out, I had an idea that I thought would really help Microsoft, but I needed some help. I wanted to put music in video games before there was music. And so I literally reached out, wrote to Bill Gates, somebody I didn't know, I had no way to know, and asked him if he would introduce me to another billionaire, a guy named David Geffen, who was the biggest guy in the music industry. And Bill did it. And David, of course, took the meeting, and fast forward, video games have changed. Now, Bill could have said no. I'd be the same place where I was. So you have nothing to lose, but you don't go on LinkedIn and say, hey, will you be my mentor? It doesn't work that way. And so there's a technique that works, it's been proven, and I really walk through that because don't fly solo. It's not achievable, and you're a fool if you think you can do it. The next big mistake that is the number one reason why businesses fail, and we could play the game and everything, but I'll save it, is people don't understand what business they're in. Whether you're starting a restaurant, a clothing line, anything, your business is high tech. You are in the tech industry. The last purchase you bought, where did you find out about it? You looked on your phone, you looked on the computer. If I had you in a room, I would ask you, what is the number one best performing tech stock of the 21st century on Nasdaq or the New York Stock Exchange? It's probably globally, but it's a US company. And you'd think, well, Apple or Microsoft or Zoom, or you'd all be wrong. The number one tech stock that you should have bought in the year 2000 was Domino Pizza. How's Domino's a tech thing? Domino's created an app that lets you order, that lets them track you, that lets them give you special promotions, They have more people working in IT than any other part of their company now. They are a tech company. The fact that their product is pizza is secondary. And if you're not running your company tech-centric, if you're not thinking of it in those terms, your competition definitely is. So huge, huge issue to think about. The next one is really not a truth that you have to follow, but if you want the quickest way to create wealth or to change the world, it's the only one to follow. And I have a system called MOVE, M-O-V-E. First, you have the mindset, which we talked about. Then you find an obstacle that you're going to solve, okay? And then the V is void. You have to fill a void in the market. Yes, you can come out with a car when everybody else has a car. Kind of tough to sell. A lot of competition. You can come out with another protein bar. You can come out with another pair of shoes. But unless your business solves a void, you have competition. I hate competition. All the companies I've done, eBay and LinkedIn, nobody else was doing it. So you didn't have to be the best in the world. If you're the only one doing it, you are the best. So it's that simple. Now, when you fill a void, everybody else is going to follow, but you have such a head start. And where do these voids come from? Problems that you already have, problems that mankind has, problems that have already existed, but there's a new technology that can solve it in a new and novel way. So going back to my robot example, people have been growing cotton and corn and soy for 14,000 years. Bugs have been there for 14,000 years. Weeds have been there for 14,000 years. And for the past 100 years, we've used poison. If you want to launch a new poison company to go up against the other guys with the deadly poisons, good luck. You're never going to get there. But nobody at the poison company knows anything about robotics. They weren't looking at a different way to solve the problem. And now if you're the only one, here's what was interesting. If you don't have to buy the poisons, you end up making 40% more per acre. So every farmer wants this. And if you're not using poisons in the food, and there's a lot of crops that are grown in the US that we can't sell to Europe because the poisons that are in them, Europe has outlawed, rightly so, because they cause cancer and kill people. So if now the farmer's making more money, but you can tell the consumer, you could buy this safe flour or this flour that kills you, you're going to buy the safe flour. Third is you don't have poisons running off in the US down the Mississippi. The Gulf of Mexico has no fish anymore because of all the poison. So now you bring back the oceans. And fourth, you're not releasing carbons, all because we found a void that no one was focused on. 10 years from now, there'll be a lot of robotics companies, a lot of people in the space. And if I'm still around, I'll be solving a new problem. So really focus in terms of a void. Here's the other thing that you have to realize. Silicon Valley, the real venture capitalists, only back monopolies. That's how they make their money and their obscene returns. Think about it. The second an Uber comes along, it's an idea that could have been done everywhere. And Uber raises $1 billion in capital. Who's going to give capital to Lyft or number 2 or number 3? They fade away. So for 20 years now, 30 years almost, Silicon Valley's played the monopoly game. So if you find a void and you can prove that it's a void and you're the first one out there, you'll have no problem raising a ton of capital. Which leads me to the 10th truth. There is a $1 trillion opportunity out there that no one has a head start on, and no one is looking to do what you can do. And this opportunity hits in 24 months from now. And it's augmented reality. So spatial reality, whatever you want to call it. We're all going to be wearing glasses, heads-up glasses that change our life. Instead of spending 4 hours a day looking at our phone, what we need is going to be up here. And if you don't think you'll read glasses, in the US this year, 50 million pairs of glasses were sold. that cost more than $150 a pair that came with one app, Focus. Another 30 million were sold, came with another app called sunglasses. So people will wear glasses to solve a problem. And my clients, Microsoft and Google and others, are building the glasses. So let's think through this problem for a second, because this is the best advice you're going to get today. Google makes more money than anybody ever thought of by monetizing search and advertising. If you're no longer looking at your phone or your computer and Google isn't here, Google goes out of business. If you're not taking your phone out and Apple doesn't sell you these, Apple goes out of business. And if social isn't here, Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. So these are existential threats. So these companies are spending billions to make sure that they own their slice of this future. But here's what they're not worried about. They're not worried about making millions. So let's go back 10 years. 10 years ago, when the iPhone came out, Apple changed the world. We all use smartphones. But Apple didn't focus on apps, they focused on the ecosystem. And the first year, let me tell you, 2 of the top 10 best-selling apps in the world. One was the fart app. That's it. You get to your 10 different farts. The other was a game with cats. And you go, why am I telling you this? Because think of all the apps that have become billion-dollar businesses that you could have started anytime. There were voids in the market. Now, what are the voids that people aren't focusing on here? So yes, LinkedIn will be here. I'll be able to walk up to you in a meeting. And if I don't remember your name and you're one of my LinkedIn friends, I can see your name above you. I can see the name of your wife and your dog and go, oh, how's Rover doing? Yeah, don't think of those. Think of other use cases of problems in your life, your industry, your field. Your field is moving to here. The 11th truth.
So
Working hard does not make you rich.
Jay, we have a couple of minutes, so 12:30 is the end. We'll need a bit of space for questions.
Okay, let me just finish these 2 real quick.
Okay.
Deal structure. Deal structures will make you rich. Bill Gates' father, being a lawyer, helped him figure out a licensing model for DOS, which led him to become a billionaire. And I go on and on. So study deal structure. That's more important than anything else you can do. And the last one is remote workers, which we talked about earlier. Taking the best people that you can from wherever you can. So I hope that was helpful. That was the truncated version of my new book, which I'll plug while I'm looking up questions. You can get it right now on Amazon. Okay, questions.
So
maybe why am I not seeing questions?
So a question for you, Jay. So today is an event about the EcoCity revolution, the future, the next gen technologies. What are companies you think investors, entrepreneurs should be looking out for? Maybe, buying a stock, we're not, no financial advisors here, but, looking on the stock market, companies you really think are moving in the right way, disrupting, changing their business model and could lead tomorrow in the new era we're about to go into.
And you want that answered in a couple seconds? So first of all, I'm super bullish, as I mentioned, on spatial reality and everything that's going to happen. VR, not a big field. AR and what that's going to do, completely change every aspect of your life. Anything that can be automated will be automated. And more jobs are disappearing. Half of all jobs will disappear in the next 5 years. I was thinking about the other day when I was watching somebody shooting a movie here in LA, that to get that nice aerial shot, you used to have a cameraman and a helicopter pilot and a helicopter. And now it's a few $100 drone, right? Those jobs disappear, that expertise. This is happening everywhere. My favorite automation right now in California is a self-driving pizza delivery truck that figures out how many minutes it is to your house, turns the oven on in the truck when it knows it's the right amount, so it gets to your house right when it's done piping hot. The roof opens, the drone takes it up, and you put a little QR code wherever you want the pizza delivered, and it comes right down. Mwah! I live for pizza. So focus on these new fields. That's where the opportunity is. You don't have to be really good if you're the only one. You'll figure it out. So that's the advice. and look at those companies that are trying to change these things that are solving real problems.
Excellent.
Next question.
We have a question from Nick Anderson. So he's the president of Keiretsu Forum, one of the largest, most active business angel group in the world. And Nick is asking, this is awesome. So first, he's ordered your book. This is great. Could you elaborate on AR a little bit more and the opportunity for investors? Any directions you can give Nick and his group?
So let me make sure I understand the question. Just to elaborate why I'm bullish on AR?
Yes.
So here's the thing. None of us thought we'd become addicted to our phones. And by moving the phone, just like you got Apple Watch to your wrist, it really didn't change anything. But heads-up display changes everything. If you're a realtor, you can walk down the street and see the price per square foot of every house that's on the market. If you're in a new city and you want to say, how do I find, a vegan restaurant? You can see a green line and just follow it. You can go into supermarket. The doctor just told you you have diabetes. You can't have anything with sugar, or you want to be on the keto diet. The supermarkets have 40,000 products. Say, show me the things that are keto. Everything else disappears. I worked on this for the largest retailer in the US. This is not fiction. This is coming. Or heart disease. Nobody can read all those little labels. Show me those things. Here's a bunch of wines. What was the wine I had last week? Show me the wines just from France. Whatever it is, show me the wines from France in my price point. Our whole world will now have context. So it's no longer searching. The era of searching for information will go away. Information will come to you when you need it. I have a self-driving car that I love and am in love with it, that I drive around in. But now, imagine it knows my eating habits and viewing habits and everything else that Google and Facebook know about me. And they know it's 2 o'clock. I've been doing a speech, so I haven't had lunch. And I'm a mile away from a McDonald's, and they make a French fries float in the sky. If I touch them, my car will drive there and I'll get a free French fry with my order. So marketing changes. Everything becomes from advertising to completion of sale in real time. And that's just the beginning. Self-diagnostics, we have a shortage of doctors. So AR will be part of that. And I can go on and on. It will impact every field. Firemen can be in smoke and see where the walls are and where the stars are. I'm just obsessed. Time for one last question, I think.
Yes. So basically, Adam Finkel, who challenges since this morning in different talks, so he says, why not just use a search engine?
Because when you're walking around, do you really want to stop to do this? You're going to see voice and thought being the new interfaces, and sound in ways that we haven't thought. So you'll think, I want vegan food, and that line will appear. So the idea, typing's wonderful, but if you don't have to, why? And just as with Netflix or everything, AI has figured out recommendation engines to anticipate your need in that one activity. There will be a range of AI tools when we have edge computing and 5G out there, anticipating every aspect of your life. So that's the reason.
Yeah, no, this is absolutely exciting. I can see a lot of, even in conferences like CES, for instance, where, you can be guided.
And low-cost glasses that do what I talk about. And one company has contact lenses, which is insane. 2 Christmases from now, these will be common objects that people buy for unbelievably reasonable price points.
Okay, I was about to ask the timeline. So two years from now, impressive. Okay.
But now's your time to start building that app, building that solution, getting in these developer programs.
Well, Jay, thank you so much. So I really encourage everyone to buy, both of Jay's books. They're really great. Trust me on this one. The first book inspired us at Innouvo to actually take a leap of faith, take what Jay talked about, courage. The second book is also ordered on my end. So thank you so much, Jay. I'm looking forward to reading the books and talking to you real soon.
I wish you all success. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Thank you.